Welcome, everyone, to our ONlit session tonight. We're so glad you are here. We will start tonight with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that ONLIT's work takes place on traditional Indigenous territories. We acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. We're thankful to be able to work on this land, and we're thankful to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people for their care and teachings about the earth. This acknowledgement reminds us of our responsibilities to our relationships and to the ancestral lands on which we learn, work, and live. We sincerely hope that you will see our commitment to the important process of reconciliation within and beyond education in the pages of the resources that we are sharing tonight. So, hello, my name is Lisa Rogers, and I'm so excited to talk about our Fluency and Perspective resources tonight, including our brand new Grade 7 resource across the curriculum, which will be available in our resource library just before our session ends. We will dive into the resources right away. But first, our agenda. I will begin tonight by explaining a bit about our goals for this series of resources and our process. Ayesatta will review some of the important research around fluency. Laura Bross will walk us through the new Grade 7 resource. And then Catherine will share her ongoing work in the classroom with the Grade 8 resource. She will share all the best tips and tricks for using this resource to its full potential. I will wrap things up with some next steps, and there will be some time for questions. So here they are. The Fluency in Perspective Grade 7 across the curriculum resource includes 22 passages with topics ranging from science to health, the arts, and history and geography, each connected to subject curriculum objectives. The Grade 8 resource, already in use across Ontario, has 14 passages about diverse changemakers that have shaped our communities. Both resources include educator pages with pre-teaching content to make the learning accessible. All right, now I'm going to share a bit about the goals and the process of making these resources. We actually had many goals in mind when we began developing this series of resources. I remember telling Catherine Shawana about the idea for this resource that prioritized sharing stories from diverse and powerful individuals that embody joy at last year's IDA Lit-Learn conference. Good things happened at that conference. I remember that we both got chills thinking about how it could potentially make a difference in the way that students visualize themselves, as well as their skills in reading, both of which would build equity. I'm very grateful to this team of educators, Ayesatta, Laura, Marissa, Teresa, and Catherine, who shared in the joy and the work of this project. The inspiration for Fluency and Perspective actually sparked for me when I attended a presentation at an online summer conference by Ontario educator Casey Jo Hackett. This really incredible educator paired some quotes from Gholdy Muhammad's book, Unearthing Joy, which if you haven't read it, I really recommend it. She paired it with pieces of the 2023 language curriculum. So I was inspired by Casey Jo Hackett and really inspired by these beautiful words by Gholdy Muhammad. And yes, I was inspired by our new curriculum. Weaving Strand A into everything we do is really exciting for me. I loved this quote from Gholdy Muhammad, and I also loved that our new curriculum said, are there a range of texts available to engage various student interests, spark curiosity, and provide a sense of excitement and joy? And that it also said high quality evidence-based instruction coupled with a classroom environment that promotes joy, engagement, and motivation is the key to students developing language skills proficiently. These many ideas, these many important ideas, are truly the bedrock of fluency and perspective. The ONlit resource Fluency and Perspective also aligns with the instructional hierarchy, which was really important to us because it supports skill development across the 4 stages. So it supports acquisition by providing explicit instruction and modeling, helping students acquire foundational literacy skills such as decoding and word recognition. By using scaffolding techniques and guided practice, we ensure initial accuracy before increasing complexity. For example, pre-teaching tricky vocabulary words before reading supports accuracy. For the fluency stage, this resource includes repeated reading and timed reading opportunities to enhance automaticity. It also focuses on prosody, expression consistent with everyday speech, which improves overall reading fluency. In the generalization stage, Fluency in Perspective supports students in transferring fluency skills to different texts and genres. The research shows that fluency work in one passage will transfer to a new passage. And those of us implementing the grade 8 resource have seen that, and it's been really exciting. In the adaptation stage, this resource provides opportunities for critical thinking and synthesis of information. Students access previous knowledge and make connections beyond the text, transferring knowledge across disciplines. You'll see some comprehension questions in the grade 7 collection, and it's our hope to create an addendum to the grade 8 resource to do the same. And we can probably click through that. Wonderful, thank you. That's great. Okay, so this next quote is from Step Lab, the documentary, which really showcases the power of routine. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's definitely powerful at looking at routines. And whether our routines are rigid or flexible, they definitely just create space for learning. I was going to stop now and ask if you might take a moment to add into the chat any routines that you have seen really create space for learning, really take that emphasis away from, oh, what are we doing right now? How are we doing this? And putting that emphasis onto the learning itself. So if you could just add into the chat routines that you find are powerful, routines that really create that trigger of a sequence of actions for students. I see, thank you, Debbie, a vocabulary routine. Oh, partner reading, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, talk before you write, yes. So, you know, I've actually seen a lot of educators surprised by the quick fluency routine, which is in the Fluency and Perspective resource. Because once students have done the routine a few times, much like the routines you've mentioned in the chat, once the students have done these routines a few times, it becomes easy to move quickly into the flow, reducing confusion and disruptions to learning. The start of the quick fluency routine triggers a sequence of actions for students, like finding their partner, setting up materials, getting ready to read, and then graphing results. The routines for preloading via explicit instruction in vocabulary, morphology, syntax, etc., also build their own rhythm and support that attention to content instead of process. I love this visual. I think it's really striking in the way that it clearly illustrates how much impact a routine can have on moving away from the how we are learning onto the more important content of what we're learning. Routines also create a feeling of predictability and safety for students. Pre-teaching, another really important component of this resource. If you've been attending the fabulous Laura Bross's book study on harnessing the science of learning, you will have no doubt enjoyed Zach Groschel's presentation on reducing cognitive load to support learning. Groschel, author of Just Tell Them, emphasizes that we need to pre-teach complex material whenever possible. And we really hope that the features found on the educator pages prefacing each fluency passage make your jobs easier by making more learning possible because you're pre-teaching the parts of complex material before the student reads the passage in its full complexity. The grade 7 resource is unique in that it is directly tied to cross-curricular expectations. So researchers like Newman and Wexler or writers like Wexler promote cross-curricular reading opportunities to build background knowledge and develop skills in all different types of text. It's different reading a science text than a language class text, right? One final goal for this resource and everything we do at ONlit really is to provide equitable supports in both French and English. And so there is a launch party for the French resource, La Fluidité en Perspective, next week on April 15th at 7 p.m., hosted by Jordan Sloan and Renata Dean en Français. So please spread the word. I'm going to talk briefly about our process now. Our process started with AI generation of articles, but we found quite a lot of small errors, and we ended up rewriting articles fully or partially and generally heavily. After that, we read each article aloud together and reflected on both readability and suitability of text. Then we edited and revised each article to fit into the Lexile band of 1010 to 1200 by measuring the Lexile levels and adjusting until we hit the target. Then we built the educator pages with pre-teaching content. I will share more about the Lexile bands in just a moment. In terms of suitability, though, we went through each article carefully asking 6 important questions. All 6 questions can be found in the front matter of the resource, but these 4 are highlighted for you today. Eventually, this process became internalized, and I think I can speak on behalf of my co-developers and share that are there any voices that are missing became a very key question, and the answer, yes, there are important voices missing, often emerged. This led us to find quotes from primary sources whenever possible to ensure that all voices were included in an accurate and respectful way. In terms of readability and to ensure text complexity, we used that Lexile level analyzer as mentioned. So Lexile levels determined by a formula relating to sentence length and complex vocabulary. And there are other measures out there, but we chose to work with Lexile levels due to accessibility to the measure. And we picked the Lexile level band of 1010 to 1200 as it aligned most closely with the largest number of grade 7 and 8 Lexile level recommendations we could find. But Lexile levels are complicated and different organizations actually recommend different Lexile levels for different grades, purposes, and individual students. There really isn't a standard recommendation by grade level. So a Lexile level was the starting point for us, but group consensus about suitability and readability for the age and stage of our intermediate students was equally at the forefront. Both prior to and after lexiling the articles, the guiding question, will this reading support the age and stage of students, was really important. While these texts might seem too challenging at a glance in that they are complex, Shanahan reminds us that we need to give our students complex text. We need to help them grow those skills. And the routines of rereading and scaffolding in Fluency and Perspective make the text appropriate for practice or training for our students to become fluent readers of complex text. And now I will turn things over to Ayesatta to talk a little bit more about fluency.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Good evening, everyone. So happy that you're all here on this amazing evening where we get to share what we've been doing for quite some time. So it's an exciting time for us, as for sure. So my name is Ayesatta, and I am a TDSB CERT teacher, so special education resource teacher at a school called Chief Dan George Public School in the East End here of Toronto. And I'm also a member of the curriculum assistance team. And a little bit about what we do. We pretty much answer any questions that you may have with regards to the language curriculum, evidence-based practices, assessment, whatever it is, we're here to support you. So I thought I'd just share that with you, and we're pretty much all part of that team as well. So we're here to support you. So a little bit about Fluency, which really is the foundation of our resource that we've created. Fluency essentially is a foundational skill, as we all know, that allows students to access comprehension. That is our end goal. It's about our students' ability to read texts accurately at an appropriate pace, and of course, with expression, with prosody. Fluency essentially is the bridge between word recognition and comprehension. As decoding is automatized, students increase their ability to read texts fluently, freeing up their cognitive resources to focus on the meaning of the text, which is really what we want. We want them to get to the meaning. We don't want them to be struggling decoding as they're reading. So first and foremost, reading fluency relies on accuracy, being able to read with ease, decoding the words from the page, or as we say, lifting off the words from the page. And in the words of Dr. Jan Hasbrook, she reminds us countless times that fluency is not fast reading. And I think sometimes our students think that it means we have to, read fast, speed reading. A fluent reader reads at the rate of speech, right? That comfortable rate at which we speak to each other in, so that we can make sense of the information that we're sharing. And also so our brains can also process and make sense of the information, right? If you're reading too slowly, that affects comprehension. And again, if you're reading too fast, it also affects your ability to make meaning, right? Thank you for that, Laura. It's not fast reading, but reading well. Exactly. Moving on now, in our curriculum, so on the next slide here, um, in the curriculum, we know that fluency is a major component in our curriculum with all the revisions. In our B2.3 section, there's some information there on the slide that you can take a look at, but we know that fluency develops as a result of strong instruction, strong tier 1 classroom instruction, and the other core components of literacy. So students' phonological awareness, phonics instruction, syntax, vocabulary, morphology. And I know Catherine's gonna, dive deeper into that as we move into the presentation, and she shares all of the wonderful work she's been doing with her grade 8 students. But the ability to read a text fluently, for them to be able to read the text fluently, students must have accurate and automatic word reading skills. And this is research from Hudson and his other authors in 2009. And also Zimmerman in 2021 reminds us that text level fluency develops with extended opportunities to practice oral reading. So the more practice students have, this also directly correlates to their improvements in fluency. And then finally, I just wanted to draw your attention to the rubric that we also have in the document that you're going to have your hands on very shortly. But we created a fluency rubric, and that can be found in the front matter of the resources. A really great way for students to assess themselves, for teachers to also use this to assess students, and also just for my own self-assessment as well. Students can look at this, check in, and see, where am I at? How am I doing? And without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Laura now, and she's going to actually walk us through some more pieces that make up the resource and how we can really use it to work for ourselves as educators and also for our students. So on to you, Laura.
There we go. Right. Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Bross, and I'm a grade 2-3 classroom educator in the Avon-Maitland District School Board. I am also a member of the curriculum assistance team here at ONlit. So next, I'll be giving you a walkthrough of the resource. We will quickly go through each section and highlight the features designed to be most helpful to you, the educators. In the first section of the file, you will find what we call the front matter. The front matter is a section full of background knowledge for the educator. We share information about the what and the why of perspectives, about our process, about fluency in general, and its connections with the curriculum. Next, you'll find information on how to use it in your classroom. Here we have detailed a quick fluency routine, how to create partner pairings and chart growth with students, and how to differentiate for students who need support accessing complex texts. Later, when Catherine speaks, she will share more in-practice details on how she implemented this resource with her grade 8 students. So now let's get to the passages. We have 22 passages, and each passage is inspired by the grade 7 content area curriculums. First, we have 4 science passages, 1 for each strand. Next, we have geography, 3 passages for each strand. In history, we have another 6 passages, 3 for each strand. I would like to add that when selecting content from the history curriculum expectations, we attempted to choose content that may be particularly difficult for classroom educators to find resources for. Now, busy classroom educators can use these fluency passages for fluency instruction, but also to build content knowledge on the above historical topics. We hope this content selection makes your planning just a little bit easier. and 2 additional passages that align with the grade 7 health curriculum. And finally, the arts with 4 more passages, 1 for each strand. Now let's walk through the educator pages for each passage. These educator pages were purposefully designed to do as much heavy lifting for classroom teachers as possible. The content is provided for you, so you can focus on effective instruction and delivery for your students. So now let's go through each piece. At the top, you will find the passage number, subject area, and title for the passage. Next, you'll find the Minds On section. It can be used to activate and build background knowledge prior to reading. Below that, you will find 2 sections. Some passages include a Words That Matter section. This supports readers with pronunciation when needed. All passages include a morphology focus. This section provides an example of how to use morphology for teaching decoding and word meaning of a morpheme-rich word that is important to the text. Then we have the vocabulary spotlight section. Here we pulled out tier 2 vocabulary words found in the passage that could be used with an explicit vocabulary instructional routine. This routine is linked in the front matter, but it's also going in the chat. We have also included some subject-specific words. These are tier 3 vocabulary words. Educators could pre-teach to support students' fluency and comprehension. We have included a spotting syntax section. This section showcases sentences with syntactical structures that may benefit from explicit instruction. We have also included additional information about the syntactical structure itself to support Ontario educators as we all learn more about syntax instruction. For more professional learning about syntax, I would highly recommend digging into the B3 Language Conventions Continuum, the ONlit Syntax Party recordings, and the Teaching Skills for Complex Textbook Study recordings. The links to all 3 of those things are going in the chat. Finally, we finished with a digging deeper section. We included 4 different types of comprehension questions. Educators could use these as discussion questions or as a written response. Again, we have tried to have the heavy lifting done so educators can focus on the important stuff, the instruction. Following each, we have the matching passage with the word counts on the right margin for easy calculating to use with the Reflecting on Progress graphing tool. The educator pages and the student passage are both 2 pages long. They can be printed double-sided on 1 page. No third page for the educator or the student that would require a staple. No one has time for extra staples. And that concludes my walkthrough of the resource. So now let's dig into the real stuff, how to put it into practice. I am happy to introduce my colleague, Catherine, who has been implementing this resource in her classroom this school year. She has so much practical advice to share, so get your pencils ready. Take it away, Catherine.
Thanks so much, Laura. You know what? You're right. That double-sided, no staple, no having to collate papers. Amazing.
It's one extra little thing. You just don't need it.
So my name is Catherine Shawana. I'm a grade 8 teacher at the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I taught grade 8 25 years ago. For the past 5 years, I was out of the classroom as a curriculum lead teacher. So I've decided to go back in and to grade 8 on purpose, believe it or not, to just put some of these structured literacy routines into practice. Throughout the past 5 years, I've helped my school make that shift out of balanced literacy to structured literacy. And I just kind of wanted to get my hands a little bit more dirty and do some of that work myself. So thank you, Laura, for highlighting the amazing supports within the resource itself. This makes planning a dream. Also, thank you, Ayesatta, for sharing the importance of fluency as a foundational skill. Because as an educator, understanding that provides me with the peace of mind, knowing that building explicit routines around fluency derives from evidence-based research. Before I officially get started, I'd just like to note that it has been a wonderful experience to work on this project. Thanks, Lisa, for sharing that goosebump moment at last year's IDA conference. I vividly remember that conversation, and here we are now, sharing not one, but two great fluency and perspective resources. Okay, so let's get started on the practicality of using this resource. So I'm here to share with you this evening that the Fluency and Perspective resource, just to keep in mind, this is the grade 8 version, is so much more than just fluency. It can make planning for your literacy block so much easier, and I have built routines around this resource that are teacher and student friendly. You can do as much or as little with this resource as you'd like. So let's dive into some practical aspects of using fluency and perspective in the classroom. So on page 10 of the resource Laura shared, that you're going to find instructions for the quick fluency routine, sometimes referred to as QFR. Feel free to rewrite a concise version of this routine on your classroom wall, kind of like what I'm displaying here on this slide. So I have very simply teachers set a timer. Oh, I see a little error there, for 1 minute. And partner 1 reads in a quiet voice when the teacher says begin. Partner 2 circles any errors made that as partner 1 reads, and when the timer beeps, partner 2 simply puts 2 lines after the last word read. And partner 1 finds their total number of words read using those numbers on the side, and they minus errors, and they calculate the words correct per minute, and then graph the results. Then we switch. Partner 2 then reads, and partner 1 tracks. So I created duotangs for each of my students. I included, I didn't photocopy the whole package. I included the quick fluency routine, the fluency rubric that Ayesatta shared, and all the passages, along with graphing sheets for each article. And as always, with a new routine, we practiced for a couple of days, but it did not take long for my students to adapt to this structured routine. With regards to partnering, in my class, it made the most sense for them to partner up with the person who was closest to them. This saved on transition time, and if I needed to be strategic, I simply assigned pairs, or I would have a student read with me. I stayed away from assigning regular reading partners or using a method such as milk and cookies, where you line up your students based on their ORF reading levels, let's say, divide them in half and align them, just due to attendance. I didn't want that situation occurring where their partner's not here and then we have to find them a partner. So we just choose the person that's closest to us. I set a timer on my smartboard and I just gleefully listen to the whispering of hum of readers, and I walk the room, eavesdropping and noting reading behaviors. This provides me with insight into further instructional needs. So on this slide, we see a sample page just marked by a student, noting errors, a double line to indicate the time is up. I've also showcased a completed fluency graph, noting progress throughout a 5-day cycle. Once students finish reading, they graph their words read minus their errors. They arrive at their words correct per minute. Students then graph this and they get to marvel at their growth. They see immediate results from their consistent effort within a 5-day cycle. So we often hear of comprehension as an outcome. So it is complex and multi-layered. It was important for my students to understand that fluency acts as that bridge from word decoding to comprehension. So when a reader is actively constructing an internal representation of the meaning, structure, and ideas in a text, we call this building a mental model. So this helps the reader make sense of what they're reading by integrating new information with prior knowledge. So it was important that when I created a weekly routine that would help, I wanted it to help to encourage to build that mental model. So students would retain information, draw conclusions, and engage more deeply within the text. So on this slide, you simply see how I roll that out, each passage through a 5-day cycle. I begin each day focusing on a specific component to help build that mental model, followed by the quick fluency routine. So for example, we'll explore this a little bit more day by day, the instructional routine that I've set forth with my grade 8s class. So let's begin with day 1, background knowledge. So the more knowledge a child starts with, the more likely she is to acquire yet more knowledge. She'll read more and understand and retain information better, because knowledge, like Velcro, sticks best to other related knowledge, quoted by Natalie Wexler. So the acquisition of new information relies on the importance of developing a strong foundation of background knowledge for effective learning. And because knowledge builds upon knowledge, it's really important that we focus on that for day 1. So the next slide, the more we know about something, the better we can comprehend when we read about it. So as educators, we need to be intentional, about helping students to build background knowledge. So I'd like to take a moment just to decipher between the two, prior knowledge and background knowledge. So prior knowledge about a topic, is what a student already knows. So while background knowledge is what a student needs to know to access information with a new topic effectively, we know that students enter our classroom with a vast array of personal experiences. So taking the time to intentionally help students build background knowledge about a topic before reading will help them to understand the text more easily, leveling the playing field to give all students access to learning. So for example, we recently read the passage Julie Black, a trailblazing musician and advocate for social change in Canada. So I preface this reading by showing a news clip of Julie being honored by the Assembly of First Nations as she was gifted with an eagle feather and a blanket for her advocacy work. In addition, we also looked at an interview with Julie as she discussed her experiences growing up in Toronto. So not only did this allow my students to enter the conversation, but it also gave them the footing to relate and connect on a personal level. So we can do that through videos, images, infographics, field trips, virtual experiences, connecting to other articles. So let's move on to day 2, vocabulary. So vocabulary plays an essential role in language comprehension. Vocabulary refers to the set of words a person knows or uses in the language. Research-based explicit vocabulary instruction includes defining the word in kid-friendly terms, analyzing the word structure, and clarifying the way the word is used in context, and connecting it to a network of other words. So Fluency and Perspective resources have pre-selected words that matter. We've done even more so in the grade 7 version. We've also highlighted additional vocabulary spotlight words to be the focus for your explicit vocabulary routine. So these are suggestions, but I often find myself creating an additional list of words worth talking about from the passage. Perhaps I noticed this in a spelling pattern, or it's a morpheme that we haven't focused on, or if I'm noticing that they need additional practice with, or maybe I've identified a cross-curricular connection that will push my students towards that generalization or adaptation stages of the instructional hierarchy framework. Remember how I said I walk the room? Usually when I'm walking the room, I'm listening for those patterns or those struggles with some of those vocabulary words, and then I will choose those words to focus on for next day. So after explicitly teaching new vocabulary, it's important to provide multiple exposures to these words to increase the likelihood that they will enter into long-term memory. So students will encounter these words through their daily reading, but you can also preface your next Fluency and Perspective lesson with a recap of key vocabulary words. So I believe Laura might have shared this already, but you can find an explicit vocabulary instruction demonstration in the resource section on ONlit. We'll post a link to that in the chat. We will also post in the chat the explicit vocabulary instruction template. So this resource is from the text Shifting the Balance. I have that right here, 6 ways to bring science of reading into the upper elementary classroom. So we'll put a link into that template as well. So on this slide, I have included a simple vocabulary routine. So basically, just as I mentioned, we're going to introduce the word, write the word for the students to read, encourage students to pronounce it, identify the word in context, provide a student-friendly definition, consider possibly an image or that word in context, check student understanding by asking examples. We really like to do synonyms and antonyms in the grade 8 room, and then have students use that word. So we use this routine quite informally. However, next year, I think for myself, I would most likely create a slide deck template to further develop this instructional routine where I can just plug in those words as we go. So let's move on to day 3, morphology. So morphology plays a critical role in both reading and writing. Research indicates that morphology instruction has consistent positive impacts on students' word reading. So morphology is the study of the structure and formation of words. I just noticed in the chat, someone asked about the Freyer model. It absolutely could work, but we could even be a little bit more explicit with that vocabulary routine. So morphology instruction looks at how words are built from smaller meaning units called morphemes. So prefixes, suffixes, roots, all words are made up of one or more morpheme. So these words are typically multisyllabic. It allows me to practically address word recognition, decoding, spelling, and of course, meaning. So I usually focus I would say more on 3 to 5 words in a session. How do I decide which words to focus on? First of all, as I mentioned, when I'm walking the room and eavesdropping on my students participating in the QFR routine, I can hear their struggles, and these words usually become my prime picks. I will also choose words that contain morphemes that we haven't encountered, or words that have morphemes that we can apply or transfer from another word we have already previously learned. Very intentional with my choices in order to build connections between words, hence building on meaning. So for example, we are currently reading a passage on the Canadian artist Sherry Boyle. I have chosen the following words to unpack: multifaceted, multimedia, and multidisciplinary. Just the prefix multi, meaning many. We will discuss in class how that prefix impacts meaning. And when we add that prefix to facet, media, and discipline, how does it impact that understanding? So I use the reading multisyllabic words anchor chart created by ONlit to help guide my students through this process. I first use this routine to read the word correctly. We then discuss the morpheme within the word by peeling those morphemes off and defining the prefix and suffixes. We then dive deeper by identifying the root word. Students can often extend this activity by creating additional words, by adding various morphemes to form new words with new meanings. This allows us to revisit previously taught morphemes. So we'll put a link in the chat for this resource, this poster. It's awesome. Blow it up, post it up on your wall. ONlit has also recently come out with morpheme cards that you can print off and post in your classroom to build your version of a morpheme wall. And as you learn new morphemes throughout the year, you can tack on those cards. Okay, let's move on to day 4. Oh, those cards, by the way, morpheme cards can be printed off in one color or various colors depending on prefix and suffix. Okay, syntax. So if a reader cannot derive meaning from individual sentences that make up a text, that's going to be a major obstacle in text level comprehension, from Nancy Chappell Eberhardt. So understanding syntax, this is a set of rules that govern how we put sentences together, the sentence structure. So it's crucial for students understanding, it's crucial for students' language development, because sentences are the first type of language structure that readers really have to unpack next to words. So sentences may range from simple to quite complex. We know that. And this highlights that a solid grasp of syntax only enhances reading comprehension, but also improves writing skills, enabling students to construct clear and coherent sentences. My favorite thing about syntax is just the connection between writing and reading. So here in day 4, best practices for teaching syntax involves meaningful practice within the context of a text. So having students analyze and imitate sentences from their reading encourages students to use more sophisticated sentence structure in their writing and in oral language. So activities such as sentence combining, sentence expanding, and sentence unscrambling will help to reinforce sentence structures even beyond fluency and perspectives. So tip for myself, just make sure you teach yourself those syntax concepts first. During my week, this is the prep work that involves actually the most prep, that I find the most challenging. I often have to make sure that I find myself teaching those the complexity of that sentence structure, obviously for myself. So in the resource, ONlit has spotted syntax for you. It gives you a great starting spot. What I do find is I do go into the spotting syntax section, and then I will go back and look at previous syntax spotlights and kind of incorporate that into the current reading. So if you use that spotting syntax section, get your highlighters ready, because you can highlight parts of speech, clauses, conjunctions, appositives, whatever previous syntax areas that you focused on in the past. You can go on a search to find additional examples or review previous concepts, write sentences together, then gradually with scaffolding, they can write sentences on their own following those same structures. So if you're looking for additional information on syntax, I believe Laura shared this as well. Listen to, for one, the Reading Road Trip podcast, season 2, episode 2. Kate Wynn is joined by Nancy Eberhardt to discuss all things syntax. So their link in the chat. And also, if you want an in-depth look, that syntax party, it's already recorded with Margie Gillis. You can have a look at that. So moving on to this is my second favorite way to use this resource to move beyond fluency. My first is the background knowledge. That's my favorite. This is my second, is response to reading. So writing about what they've read gives students opportunities to engage language to arrive at insights as they practice translating speech to print, Guff and Tumner. So the integration of writing in response to reading is widely recognized in educational research as a method to enhance comprehension and critical thinking. So engaging in writing activities related to reading material encourage students to process and articulate their understanding, thereby deepening their grasp of the content. So writing requires students to process, organize, and explain what they've read, reinforcing their understanding of that text and how well do they have a mental model of that text. Writing about a text helps students remember key ideas, details, because they actively work with the information rather than just passively reading it and flipping the page. So it also helps to build communication skills, allowing students to articulate their thoughts clearly, helping them express opinions, summarize information, engage in meaningful discussions. Responding to reading encourages students to connect text to their own experiences, making learning more meaningful and enjoyable. And then obviously increasing student engagement. So these are just a few simple ways that students can engage in reading about, engage in writing about what they are reading, whether or not it's summaries, personal reactions, reviews, ask and answer questions, compare and contrast. I tend to use the last two more frequently. Sometimes when I'm talking about main idea, after we've read a passage, we will do just kind of a paragraph shrinking approach in a way, or in 10 words or less, tell me what the passage was about. So depending on the time, how much time you have. On my next slide here, I have just a sample of a written response. So in grade 7 perspectives, we have drafted some comprehension questions for you. In the grade 8, we have not done so yet. They may be coming. So what I simply do is I go to AI, I go to ChatGPT to create a reading response question for fluency and perspective, reading passage 11, for example, on Julie Black or Rick Hansen. And at our school, we use the RACE acronym to write better answers. So I simply create a written response sheet for each article. And then here's a sample of one question that we asked with regards to the article and a student response. The great thing about the writing is, as you can see here, it gives us some areas to focus on in terms of instruction. So as I said, in grade 7, we included comprehension questions. I think I provided another example here. Here's a question. Julie Black has used her platform to advocate for social change and uplift marginalized communities. How has her advocacy work influenced public conversations about social justice in Canada? And use evidence from the passage to support your answer. So here's another example. As you can read, a sample piece of writing can easily provide instructional next steps. For this particular student, using the text as support for writing key vocabulary terms, combining sentences, using conjunctions, editing for punctuation. So this absolutely can move us beyond just a fluency and perspective, right? How we can extend this resource. Okay, so we wanted to hear from students themselves. So I was looking for feedback on their experience just engaging with this resource. So I asked them to provide some feedback. So if we can click on some quotes here from students from my class. They felt the passages were interesting and I learned about people that I hadn't heard of before. My fluency improved. I noticed I was making fewer errors. My vocabulary improved. Some articles used the same words over and over. I love that quote. I asked that student to expand. Can you expand on that vocabulary comment? And this particular student shared that there were words that were commonly used in the passages and they listed them off. We all had a giggle after he shared them. He said contributions, advocacy, determination, perseverance, resilience were often repeated. And I posed a question to him. I said, I wonder why those words would be commonly used in a series of articles about change makers. So we had a little discussion about that. and the importance of those tier 2 vocabulary words as it related to the topic. So I just want to finish off my in-practice session with some useful tips and tricks. So here we go. Number 1, as always, preview the text selection. Get a sense of where you're going for the week. The great thing is you've created this weekly routine, so you know what you're doing each week, and you're just kind of plugging in your focus. Tip number 2, use page protectors and place all passages in a duotang. This will allow you to save on paper and reuse duotangs year after year. When you're highlighting on those page protectors, they easily kind of erase off. Tip number 3, place graphing papers at the back of the duotang. Don't put them after each article. I find students will make mistakes graphing and will want new sheets, so simply place them at the back of the duotang so you can easily add more if needed. Tip number 4, listen to them read. It's my favorite part. Walk that room. That provides you with the opportunity to hear your students read daily. It will provide you with the key words to use when practicing your multisyllabic decoding routine. Tip number 5, set a timer for I think this is my students' favorite, 1 minute and 3/100 of a second, because I always tell my students they need 3/100 of a second to realize what I'm asking them to do. So giving them that little boost, then to me really ensures that they're reading for that 1 minute. Tip number 6, I did not do this, but I wish I had. Voice record their reading for the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and the end of the year. Your students will improve their fluency, and it happens quickly. They will see it on their graphs, but it would be great for them to hear their growth as well. So I hope these in-practice slides have been helpful and kind of provided you with the insight you needed to get started. The resource requires minimal prep to incorporate a quick fluency routine. Pace yourself and begin to gradually incorporate the background knowledge, vocab, syntax, morphology, and some reading responses to make the most of these passages. So we take something that would be a 1-minute quick fluency routine, and we've kind of translated that into like a 20-minute kind of explicit literacy routine. So thank you for listening to my journey, and I will pass things on to Lisa to share our next steps, because as we work through implementing this resource within our own classrooms, we are constantly reflecting and making improvements. So thank you for your time.
Catherine, thank you so much. That is really what we always want to know as educators. How does it roll out in the classroom? And your insight, your tips, your tricks are going to be so useful. Before we wrap things up, we want you to know that this has been such an exciting learning journey for us. We love that educators across Ontario have embraced these resources and have seen growth in reading skills, but we really are still learning. And if there are errors in a passage, if you have suggestions, if you see beautiful progress, please let us know. We love having input. If you've got ideas for passages, we love that too. So it is our sincere hope to continue this. I mentioned earlier that we hope to create an addendum of comprehension questions for the grade 8 resource. We have some other steps in mind too. We want in future resources, and perhaps even in a revised of version 1.2 or whatever, we want to bold target vocabulary in the text. That's an idea that we think would be really useful in future that we have come to learn. We are also aiming to be more strategic with the syntax and try to relate it very directly to that B3 continuum. We want to try to use some of the same language, maybe some of the just specific pieces of syntax from that continuum, and connect it with the work that we're doing in the syntax section. So we're all really hopeful that we will have a 3rd year of funding at ONlit so that we can continue creating resources in this series. So as we move into our last slide and saving just a couple of moments for questions at the end, we're wondering if you could just poll the chat, just input into the chat if there would be another grade you would like us to cover next. what grade do you think might need a fluency in perspective um, resource next? Think about that and input that if you can, just for the next couple of moments. Any thoughts?
We have a lot of work to do, ladies.
Oh no. You know what? That's wonderful because it is an exciting process, right? Good stuff. Okay. So I know Laura and Ayesatta have been watching for questions in the chat and such. Are there any questions at this time that we should answer?
Yeah, I've got a couple written down. Catherine, there was one question. So with your daily focus, does the class do like the repeated reading every day as well?
Absolutely. So we focus on one passage for 5 days. So we're totally entering that text. So I start with my, not the quick fluency routine to start. First, I start with my lesson, whatever that's going to be, background knowledge, vocabulary, morphology. The one thing that I love about that is we're accessing the text too at different points. We're not necessarily reading it all together from the beginning to the end every day, but it may be we're focusing on this vocabulary word. Can you find that vocabulary word within that text? Can you find another word that uses that same morpheme? Can you highlight that sentence? How is that word? You know, like just we're almost like rifling through kind of the text itself. After we've done our lesson, then I end with the quick fluency routine. Find your partner, setting my timer for 1 minute, 300ths of a second. Partner one, I'll say, partner one, who's reading first? Because sometimes they like to bicker a little bit about who's going to read first. So they'll do rock, paper, scissors on decide who's going to read first. And then I'll say, partner one's hands up. They'll put their hands up. So I know when I see everyone's hands up with the partnering group, I start my timer and then we switch.
Awesome.
Yeah.
There was another question around students who maybe are not quite at that level, or students who are having more difficulty accessing, decoding. How are you dealing with students who are perhaps having challenges reading the
Sure.
text?
So remember a couple of things. First of all, they're reading for 1 minute and they're really only challenging themselves. They're not comparing themselves to other students. They are graphing their own progress, and progress for each student is going to look different. And they're rereading the same really start of the passage. So they start to build confidence throughout the course of the week as they're rereading something that they've already have repeatedly read, right? So that's kind of one aspect to think of it. The second aspect is if it's a student that I notice is quite struggling compared to maybe everyone else, I may decide I'm going to read with that student, or I may pair that student specifically with another student to kind of support them.
Awesome.
Remember, if they're struggling with one particular word, that's simply a small group lesson. Come on over. I've noticed while you were reading, these are some key words that you're struggling with. We're going to use that multisyllabic decoding poster, and we are going to decode these words. So just providing that
I
support.
just would like to, oh, go ahead, Lisa, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say it's such a great question. And we have included some ideas for supporting students who struggle with decoding in the front matter. There's a little section, and it includes the idea that Catherine shared about reading with the student yourself. Other things are, letting the student know in advance there will be a reading routine where they will be reading out loud with someone, and ask them who they'd like to read with, if there's someone they'd like to read with, giving them the passage beforehand at night so they can take that home, or spending time with them and going through some of those difficult words and doing the multisyllabic routine. All of those things are great because we do have to support our students, because we do have students in our classrooms whose decoding skills still need support. And this routine will support that in some ways, but we need to be sensitive and thoughtful around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just all those things like you guys just said, the instructional routine, your daily focus, you're pre-teaching these skills, and then the kids get to You model lots and then the kids get to practice. So I would really encourage to try to do all those things first before we try to lower the text complexity, because we need to raise the kids so they get access to those complex texts so they can practice those with everyone. So all those strategies that Catherine just gave. I had one more question. Did you find after doing this whole week that your written responses were kind of better than maybe without it? How do you think it
Yes.
affected writing?
Yes, because they have multiple chances to engage with the reading. So we've provided them with background knowledge to build upon, right? Knowledge builds upon knowledge. So they can access that resource at a more level playing field. We've unpacked challenging vocabulary, and doing that then adds to the understanding of the article. We've deciphered complex sentences. So throughout the week, we're continuously building that mental model of the week. So we're revisiting that text daily. So by the end of the week, when there's a question that I pose to them, we've thoroughly gone through that article multiple times. So they feel confident answering that. And as always, like, you know, I wouldn't necessarily give a question, okay, use this acronym, go ahead, write yourself, right? We've answered questions together too as a class. I've modeled that for them. We've done that together before I release that and scaffold them for them to do that, just that gradual release of responsibility before they're doing that independently.
There's two questions that kind of go together. They're logistics. Is each student reading the text only once every day and graphing, or are they doing it like they doing more than one 1 minute read?
So this year I did do just one 1 minute read and then graphing that once. Now, I know there's fluency routines out there. I can think of other classes within my school who are doing 1 minute reads 3 times and then graphing that best score. You could do that if that's something that you've been doing in the past. Like, I don't see any harm in them reading it 3 times for 1 minute and then graphing their best score. They're reading, they're practicing, right? So I think if whatever kind of suits you, whatever you enjoy the most.
Okay. And then the last one I have, how many instructional minutes a day do you think you put towards this routine? Like, how long did it take? Or
It all depends. I'm going
varies?
to say about 20 minutes. I'd say about 20 minutes, I would say. It all depends. Day one, I find sometimes is a little longer because we're doing some background knowledge. Even though this week with Sherry Boyle, we looked at actually a really neat video of her from CBC creating one of her artistic pieces. So there wasn't much actually sound at all. It was just us observing what she was doing and discussing how that helped us to preface our knowledge with the article. But there was another video we watched, and I actually started that on day 2 before we went into a vocabulary. I'm like, I'm going to show you another little video to kind of just connect with Sherry a little bit more. So, and that was a collaboration piece, because after we read the article, we realized that she is a collaborative artist. She likes to collaborate with a lot of other Canadian artists. So then we showcased a collaboration piece on day 2. So it just kind of all depends, but I would say about 20 minutes or so.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question before we probably start wrapping up. Would you say, like, you were using the grade 8 resource? I can't remember. Was it 22 passages too, or is it a different number?
No, I think there's only 14 or something like that.
14, okay. So the question was, would it take half a term? Like, how do you look at that as your annual kind of learning plan there?
So I didn't start right away at the beginning of the year because I can't remember when we released this resource, to be honest with you. So right now we are currently, I think we have 2 more passages to read. You can if I start next year in September, I may interweave this maybe with some articles or different fluency passages from oral reading fluency, for example, phonics for reading, some other type of fluency readings that actually has the numbers on the sides. You could interweave it with that. Or once I'm finished with this, I would probably go into that. Yeah, I would just use another word counted Lexile level for grade 8. So something like for ReadWorks or Comet Lit, something like that.
Awesome. All right, Lisa, I'll let you.
Yeah, it is exactly
Yeah.
8:15, so we will finish now. Thank you for all of your great questions, your interest. It is very exciting. The resource has just dropped in our chat. It is available on the ONlit website. If you Google Fluency and Perspective, it will come up now, but it's right there in the chat if you'd like to dive in. We hope you enjoy it, and please send any feedback. We're really excited for this resource to go out there and make a difference. So thank you, everyone. Have a lovely night.